The gravel crunched under my boots, sharp and cold in the December air. Diesel exhaust hung like a ghost over the clinic parking lot. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed against beige walls that smelled of antiseptic and something sweeter, Celeste's perfume, too heavy for morning. The nurse called my name. Celeste stood before I did, smoothing her coat. "I'm coming in with you." I didn't argue. Hadn't argued much in the 2 years since Helen died, and loneliness carved me hollow. Dr. Kale greeted us with a practiced smile, but her eyes found mine and held. "Mrs. Gilchrist, if you don't mind waiting outside, I need a moment alone with your husband." Celeste's jaw tightened. Her heels clicked out. Sharp, annoyed, like a clock counting down to something I couldn't see yet. The door closed. Dr. Kale's voice dropped. "Mr. Gilchrist, before any vasectomy, we review medical history." She opened a file, wouldn't meet my eyes. "Your records show you've already been sterilized. 2 years ago, during your hernia surgery." The room tilted. "I never consented to that." Dr. Kale's face softened with something close to pity. "I know." The drive home stretched longer than the 18 miles back to the farm. Celeste scrolled through her phone, humming along to some pop song on the radio. The sound grated, artificial cheer against the ringing silence in my skull. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white, the road blurred. She didn't ask what the doctor said, didn't look up from the glowing screen in her lap. At the turnoff to our lane, she finally spoke. "So when's the surgery scheduled?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. The words were stones in my throat. She glanced over, eyebrows raised. "Warren?" "Next week," I lied. My voice sounded like someone else's, flat, far away. "Good." She went back to her phone. "I'll make sure I'm free to drive you." The farmhouse appeared through bare trees, white paint peeling where I'd meant to fix it last spring. Helen used to nag me about that. Celeste never mentioned it. Never mentioned much about the place at all, except when she talked about improvements that cost more than grain prices could cover. I parked by the barn. She went inside without waiting, heels clicking across the porch boards. I sat in the truck until the cold seeped through my coat. 2 in the morning, the house was dark except for the laptop glow in my office. I'd locked the door, something I'd never done when Helen was alive. The search bar cursor blinked. Unauthorized sterilization, Kansas law. The results made my chest tight. Malpractice, assault, battery. Words I'd only heard on lawyer shows Celeste watched while I did evening chores. I clicked through page after page, found a forum where men talked about doctors who'd tied tubes without consent, about wives who'd forged signatures, about the statute of limitations that turned justice into a ticking clock. My phone buzzed. Nessa's name lit the screen. "Dad? It's 2 in the morning. You okay?" My daughter's voice, Helen's voice, really, the same cadence, nearly broke me. "I need to ask you something." I kept my voice low, though Celeste slept 2 rooms away. "My hernia surgery, 2019, August. You remember anything about it?" Silence on the line. Then, "Dad, what's going on? Just, do you remember?" A pause. I heard her shifting, maybe sitting up in bed 3 states away. "I was visiting that weekend. Flew in from Denver because you said it was no big deal, just routine. But you know what I do remember? Celeste wouldn't let me come to the hospital. Said you'd asked for privacy, wanted her to be the only one there." My hand tightened on the phone. "Why?" Nessa's voice sharpened. "What did she do?" "I don't know yet." The laptop screen swam in my vision. "But I'm going to find out." "Dad." "Go back to sleep, honey. I'll call you tomorrow." I hung up before she could press harder, before I had to say the words that would make it real. On the screen, one line stood out from a legal advice thread. "Always get copies of your surgical consent forms. They're your proof." I opened a new tab and searched for the hospital's medical records department. The website said requests took 7 to 10 business days. I filled out the form. Hands steady now, purpose replacing shock. Outside, wind rattled the window, the kind of cold that made metal brittle and men careful. December wind that promised a long winter ahead. I hit submit. The cursor spun, processing. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaked. I froze, listening. But it was just the old bones of the place settling, the way they always did when temperatures dropped below freezing. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. Helen's voice in my memory. "You're too trusting, Warren. Not everyone means well." I'd laughed it off back then, told her cynicism was no way to live. Turns out she'd been right. Through the office window, the grain silo stood black against the starlit sky, 40 feet of curved steel that had held 4 generations of Gilchrist wheat. My great-granddad built the first one in 1889. My father added the second in 62. I'd restored both after Helen died, when I needed something to fix that would stay fixed. Celeste wanted to sell them, said modern operations didn't need on-site storage, that we could lease space in town and pocket the difference. I'd said no. Only time I'd ever told her no about anything. She'd smiled, kissed my cheek, said, whatever you think is best, honey. But her eyes had been cold. I looked at those silos now and wondered what else I'd been too blind to see. The feed store smelled like molasses and dust, familiar as my own sweat. I'd been coming here since I was 16, buying seed and bull feed and whatever else kept a farm breathing. The wood floors creaked the same way they had for 60 years. I needed fence staples, simple errand, in and out, but voices carried in a place like this, especially when men thought you couldn't hear. Heard Gilchrist can't have kids no more. The voice came from the grain counter, around the corner where 50-pound bags stacked to the ceiling. But his wife's pregnant. Funny how that works. My boots stopped moving. Maybe it ain't his. A second voice, younger, somebody's ranch hand probably. You seen her? Way too pretty for an old man like Warren. Laughter, low and mean. My hands went cold despite my gloves. Wouldn't be the first time a young wife went looking elsewhere. The first voice again. I recognized it now. Pete Halverson, who ran cattle on the section north of mine. Remember when... A hand clamped on my shoulder, Boyd's grip, firm enough to hurt. Let's go. My brother's voice was quiet but hard as fence posts. Now. He steered me toward the door. I moved like a man underwater, everything slow and muffled. The kid at the register called after us, but Boyd kept walking, kept me moving until we were outside, in the bright cold. Get in the truck. Boyd opened his passenger door. Mine, not yours. I obeyed. Didn't trust myself to drive. He climbed in, started the engine, turned the heat on full blast. Didn't speak. Just sat there while I stared at my hands, at the calluses that proved 50 years of honest work, at the wedding band Helen put there, and I'd never taken off even after Celeste slid a new one, on my other hand. They don't know anything, Boyd finally said. Just flapping gums. They know enough. My voice came out rough. Whole town's gonna know soon. Boyd's jaw worked. He pulled out a thermos from behind his seat, poured coffee into the lid, handed it to me. It was still hot, bitter, and black. The smell cut through the fog in my head. You talked to that doctor yet? The one who did your surgery? Left the state. 2020. Dr. Kale said he's under investigation for insurance fraud. Boyd swore, soft and thorough. You sure about Celeste? I took a long swallow of coffee. It burned going down. Not sure about anything anymore. Then get sure. He started backing out of the lot. And Warren, stop going places alone until you do. Dr. Keel's office was smaller than the consultation room, crammed with files and medical texts that smelled like old paper and photocopier toner. She'd called me that afternoon, said she had something I needed to see. She closed the door, locked it. That's when I knew it was bad. I pulled your complete surgical file from 2019. She opened a manila folder, slid it across her desk. Look at the consent form, the signature. I picked up the paper. My name was typed at the bottom, Warren Gilchrist, and beneath it, a signature in blue ink. Not my handwriting, similar maybe to someone who'd practiced, but the W was wrong, too loopy, and I never dotted my I's with circles the way this signature did. That's not mine. I know. Dr. Kale's face was pale. I had a handwriting expert look at it. Unofficial, but she's certain. That's a forgery. The room got very small and very quiet. Outside, someone's car alarm went off, distant and tinny. Shaw, the surgeon who did your hernia, he disappeared in June of 2020. Left no forwarding address. The hospital found irregularities in his billing, consent forms that didn't match up. She paused. The board started an investigation, but he was gone. Just vanished. And no one thought to tell his patients? The statute of limitations for malpractice in Kansas is 2 years from the date of injury or 1 year from when you should have reasonably discovered it. Her voice was gentle, like she was delivering a terminal diagnosis. That expired last August. You can't sue the hospital. You can't sue Dr. Shaw, even if we found him. I set the form down carefully, afraid I'd crumple it or rip it in half. But someone paid him. The words came out cold and clear to him. Someone gave him my name and made sure I didn't know what he was doing. Dr. Kale nodded. Find out who paid him, Warren. That's your case. That's your proof. I stood. The chair scraped against linoleum. Thank you for this. Sorry, I can't do more. I looked at her, this woman who'd broken protocol to help me, who'd risked her license by speaking truth. You've done enough. Outside, sleet had started falling. The parking lot gleamed like broken glass. Boyd showed up at dawn with coffee and a folded piece of paper. He didn't knock, just let himself in the way he had since we were boys, sharing a room in our daddy's house. I was already up, hadn't slept more than an hour. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast and old coffee grounds. He set 2 cups on the table, pushed one toward me. Had a visitor yesterday. He unfolded the paper, smoothed it flat. Celeste came by the ranch. My hands went still on the cup. Said she wanted to talk about your state of mind. Said you've been acting paranoid, obsessive. Accused her of things. Boyd's voice stayed level, but his eyes were hard. Then she offered me $20,000. The furnace kicked on. Warm air hissed through the floor vents. For what? To co-sign the land transfer papers. Said you wanted to put half the farm in her name for the baby's future. But you needed a family witness because of estate tax rules. He tapped the paper. This is the check she wrote. Made it out right there in my kitchen. Signed it, told me to deposit it for my trouble. I picked up the check. Celeste's signature, small and precise. The memo line read, for your silence. I told her no. Boyd wrapped both hands around his coffee. Told her Gilchrist land stays with Gilchrists, and last I checked, that baby ain't born yet, and even if it was, something didn't smell right. What did she say? Nothing, just took the check back and left. He paused. But Warren, she wasn't surprised I said no. She was testing me, seeing who she could buy. I stared at the photocopy. Boyd had been smart enough to make one before she took the original. The amount sat there in her handwriting, $20,000 salon. Who else has she talked to? Don't know. But if she came to me, she's been to others. Boyd drank his coffee, grimaced. We need to move faster than she does. The sun was starting to break through the kitchen window, pale winter light that didn't warm anything. Outside, ice covered every surface. Fence wire, tractor seats, the propane tank by the barn. Nessa's an accountant, I said slowly. Good one, too. Boyd nodded. Then it's time to call your daughter. Nessa arrived 3 days later with a laptop and a look on her face that reminded me so much of Helen, I almost couldn't breathe. That same set to her jaw when someone tried to cheat her at the farmer's market. That same fire in her eyes. She spread papers across the kitchen table. Bank statements, credit card bills, tax returns. Things I'd signed without reading because Celeste said she'd handle the finances, and I'd been grateful to let someone else carry that weight. Dad, Nessa's finger traced a line on a bank statement from 2019. August 14th, $15,000. Wire transfer to something called MedConsult LLC. I leaned closer. The date was 2 weeks before my surgery. What's MedConsult? Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Give me a minute. Boyd stood at the stove, making eggs neither of us had asked for. The smell of butter and salt filled the kitchen. He worked quietly, the way he did everything. Methodical, steady. Got it. Nessa turned the laptop around. MedConsult LLC, registered in Nevada as a medical consulting firm, dissolved in 2020. Owner of record, Dr. Marcus Shaw. The eggs popped and hissed in the pan. The surgeon, I said. The surgeon. Nessa pulled up another window. And look at this. The wire transfer was initiated from Celeste's personal account, the one she had before you got married, not your joint account. Boyd set plates on the table. 3 forks, steam rising from scrambled eggs I couldn't imagine eating. She paid him. Nessa's voice shook. 2 weeks before your surgery, she paid him $15,000. Then you go in for a routine hernia repair and come out sterile. The room spun slow and sick. Dad. Nessa reached across the table, grabbed my hand. Her palm was warm and solid. This was planned. She didn't just find some opportunity. She set this up. I thought about Celeste picking me up from the hospital, how attentive she'd been during recovery, how she'd made soup and changed my bandages, and told me how brave I was, how she'd moved into the farmhouse 6 months later, after a courtship that felt like being swept up in a summer storm, fast and overwhelming and impossible to resist. Why? My voice broke on the word. Boyd set down his fork. The land, Warren. It's always been about the land. Outside, a cardinal called from the cedar tree. sharp and bright against the gray morning. Helen used to say cardinals were messengers, signs that someone was watching over you. I wasn't sure I believed in signs anymore, but I believed in bank records. Sunday mornings smelled like coffee and hymnals, that particular blend of burnt beans and musty paper that marked every church basement I'd ever known. First Lutheran hadn't changed in 50 years. Same wooden pews our family carved initials into back in the 30s. Same stained glass shepherd watching over the congregation with patient eyes. I sat in my usual spot, third row from the front, Boyd beside me, solid as the oak pews themselves. Celeste hadn't come home Friday night, or Saturday. Her car was gone, her closet untouched, her phone going straight to voicemail. Part of me felt relief. Pastor Eugene was mid-sermon when the back doors opened, every head turned. Celeste walked in, and even from 30 feet away, I could see she'd been crying. Her face was blotchy, her makeup smeared just enough to look authentic. She wore a loose dress that emphasized the small swell of her stomach. Not showing yet, not really, but enough if you were looking for it. She didn't look at me, just walked to a pew on the opposite side, near the front where the church ladies sat. Mrs. Henderson immediately put an arm around her shoulders. Pastor Eugene paused mid-sentence. The organ hummed, waiting. "Celeste!" His voice carried that careful tone pastors use when they're stepping into something they don't want to touch. "We're glad you're here." She nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. He continued the sermon, something about forgiveness and bearing one another's burdens, but I couldn't focus on the words. All I could hear was the whisper that started in the back pews and rippled forward like wind through wheat. After the final hymn, I stood to leave. Boyd's hand on my arm stopped me. "Wait," he said quietly. Celeste was standing now, surrounded by women. She spoke just loud enough for the first few rows to hear, but in a room like this, sound carried everywhere. "I can't do it anymore." Her voice trembled. "I tried to make it work, but he's not well. He accuses me of terrible things. Won't let me see friends. Checks my phone. Last week he grabbed my arm so hard it left bruises." Mrs. Henderson gasped. "I'm pregnant." Celeste's hand went to her stomach. "I'm carrying his child, and I'm terrified. Terrified of what he might do." The room went cold. I started to stand. Boyd's grip tightened. "Not here," he whispered. "Not now. I'm filing for separation." Celeste looked directly at me for the first time. Her eyes were dry now, clear and calculating. "For the baby's safety. I wanted you all to know why I won't be living at the farm anymore." The women closed ranks around her. Pastor Eugene descended from the pulpit, his face troubled. I walked out. Didn't run, didn't rush, just moved through the aisle while the congregation parted like I carried something contagious. Outside, January sun glinted off ice-covered cars. The cold hit my lungs, sharp and clean. Boyd followed a moment later. "She's good," he said. "I'll give her that." My hands were shaking. I shoved them in my coat pockets. Everyone in there thinks I'm some kind of monster. Not everyone. Boyd pulled out his keys. But enough. Pastor Eugene caught me before I could reach the truck. He jogged across the parking lot, his dress shoes slipping on ice, his breath coming out in white puffs. "Warren, wait." I stopped, turned. He was younger than me by a decade, brought in 5 years ago, after Pastor Mitchell retired. Nice enough man, married, 2 kids, believed in the goodness of people, which was either his greatest strength or his greatest weakness, depending on how you looked at it. "Can we talk?" He gestured toward the church. "Inside, privately." Boyd started to follow. I shook my head. "I'll be fine." "I'll be in the truck," Boyd said. He didn't sound convinced. Pastor Eugene led me to his office, a cramped room that smelled like lemon furniture polish and old carpet. He closed the door, gestured to a chair. I stayed standing. "Warren, I need to ask you directly." He folded his hands, the way he probably practiced in seminary. "Have you hurt Celeste?" "No." "Have you threatened her?" "No." And he studied my face. "She says you've been acting erratically, paranoid. She's concerned about your mental state." "She should be concerned." I kept my voice level, because I found out she paid a doctor $15,000 to sterilize me without my consent. 2 weeks later, I went in for hernia surgery and came out unable to have children. Now she's pregnant and pushing me to sign over half my farm. Pastor Eugene's expression shifted. Not quite belief, but something close to doubt. "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth." I pulled out my phone, showed him the photo Nessa had sent, the wire transfer, the date, the amount. Bank records don't lie. He looked at the screen for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. Have you spoken to an attorney? Not yet. Then you need to, but Warren, he leaned forward. Violence isn't the answer, neither is revenge. If what you're saying is true, then God will handle the justice. Your job is to forgive. The word hit me like a fist. Forgive. Yes. His face was earnest, genuine. For your own soul, holding on to anger and bitterness, it'll destroy you faster than anything she's done. I thought about Helen, about how she'd spent 2 years dying from cancer that ate her from the inside out, and she'd never once asked why God allowed it, never once blamed anyone, just held my hand and told me she loved me until the morphine took her words away. I'd watched her forgive her own death, but this... Pastor, I appreciate what you're trying to do. I headed for the door. But some things aren't meant to be forgiven. They're meant to be exposed. Warren, she came here today because she knew I'd be here, knew the whole congregation would see her performance. I turned the doorknob. She's not the victim in this story. She's the architect. Everyone's redeemable, Warren. That's the foundation of our faith. I looked at this young man with his clean conscience and his simple answers. Maybe so, I said, but redemption requires repentance. And she's not sorry. She's just getting started. Boyd was leaning against his truck, arms crossed, when I came out. He didn't ask what happened, just opened the passenger door. We drove in silence for 2 miles. They're going to side with her, I finally said. The whole church, the whole town. Some will. Boyd turned onto the county road that led toward home. Some won't. You've lived here your whole life, Warren. Built a reputation over 67 years. She's been here 3. That counts for something. Does it? He didn't answer right away. The truck's heater rattled, pushing out air that smelled like antifreeze and old fast food bags. Remember when Dad died? Boyd said. And the bank tried to foreclose on the ranch because of some paperwork error. You were the one who organized the whole county to vouch for him. Got 50 farmers to sign affidavits about his character. That was different. How? He was innocent. Boyd glanced over. So are you. We turned into my lane. The farmhouse sat at the end like a patient animal, white and weathered and waiting. The grain silos rose behind it, dark against the pale sky. She's going to take it all, I said. The land, my name, my peace. She's going to strip it down to nothing and walk away clean. Boyd pulled up to the house, cut the engine. The silence was immediate and complete. Then we don't let her. His voice was hard as winter ground. We fight back, not with fists or threats or anything that makes her story true. We fight with evidence, with witnesses, with the truth. And if the truth isn't enough? Boyd looked at the silos, at the land that stretched brown and frozen toward the horizon. 4 generations of Gilchrist sweat soaked into that soil. Then we make it enough. Inside the house, my phone was ringing. The sound echoed through empty rooms that still smelled like Celeste's perfume, sweet and cloying and wrong. I didn't answer it. Outside, clouds were moving in from the west, heavy and gray, the kind that meant snow by nightfall, the kind that buried everything and made the world go quiet. The barn smelled like motor oil and hay dust, familiar as my own breathing. The old John Deere sat in the center bay where I'd pushed it last fall, a 1975 model my father bought new, green paint faded to something closer to sage, the seat cracked from 40 years of sun and rain. Boyd handed me a wrench without being asked. We'd done this dance 1,000 times, back when we were boys learning to keep machinery alive through one more season. I loosened the oil pan bolt. Black sludge dripped into the catch basin, thick and slow. The sound was steady, rhythmic, something I could control. Nessa called this morning, Boyd said. He was checking the tire pressure, moving around the tractor with practiced efficiency. Said she found something else. I didn't look up. What? Celeste filed for agricultural development grants. 3 of them. Used your name and tax ID. Applications went in last October. The wrench slipped. I caught myself before I skinned my knuckles. For what? Sustainable farming initiatives, land conservation easements, each one worth $20,000 to $30,000. Boyd's voice was flat. She forged your signature on all of them. If they get approved, the money goes into an account she set up. Your name, her access. I set the wrench down carefully, stood. My knees popped. Too many years kneeling in cold barns. How long has she been planning this? Since before she married you, I'd guess. Boyd wiped his hands on a shop rag. This wasn't opportunistic, Warren. This was a long con. Through the barn door, fields stretched white and frozen under gray sky. A hawk circled high above the tree line, looking for mice desperate enough to venture out in daylight. "The tractor ready for spring?" Boyd asked. I looked at the machine. The engine I'd rebuilt 3 times, the transmission I'd replaced when parts cost more than the tractor was worth. My father drove it when I was a boy. I taught Nessa to drive it when she was 12, let her steer while I worked the pedals, her laughter bright as summer wheat. "It will be." I picked up a socket wrench. "So will I." Boyd smiled, small and grim. That's what I wanted to hear. We worked in silence after that. The barn creaked around us, old timbers settling. Outside, wind picked up, rattling the tin roof. The sound was like rain, but sharper, colder. Sleet maybe, or snow coming. I thought about Celeste the day I met her. A hospital fundraiser in Wichita, 6 months after Helen died. She'd laughed at something I said. Not a real joke, just a comment about the rubber chicken dinner. And that laugh had felt like sunlight after a long, dark winter. I'd been so grateful for that light. Should have asked myself why someone like her would shine it on someone like me. Boyd finished with the tires, moved to check the hydraulics. "When's Nessa coming back?" "Tomorrow night. Says she's taking a week off work." "Good." He tested the 3-point hitch, listened to it move. "We're going to need her." The oil had stopped dripping. I replaced the plug, tightened it down. My hands knew the motion without thought. Muscle memory older than my marriage to Celeste, older than my grief, older than everything except the land itself. "Boyd." He looked up. "Thank you for not taking her money, for believing me." He straightened, wiped grease from his palm. "You're my brother. That's not something you thank me for. That's just what is." Simple words, but they settled something in my chest that had been loose and rattling since that day in Dr. Kale's office. I wasn't alone in this. Nessa arrived after dark with 2 suitcases and a box of file folders. She looked tired, the kind of tired that came from cross-country flights and carrying weight that shouldn't be yours to carry. I met her on the porch. She dropped her bags and hugged me hard, the way she used to when she was little and I'd been gone to the cattle auction all day. "Hey, Dad." "Hey, baby girl." She pulled back, studied my face. "You look like hell." "Feel like it, too." She picked up her suitcases. "Good. Means you're paying attention." Inside, the house was warm but empty. I'd cleaned out Celeste's things from the common areas, her magazines, her throw pillows, her collection of decorative roosters that served no purpose except to collect dust. The spaces where they'd been looked like missing teeth. Nessa set up camp at the kitchen table, spread out files and her laptop and a yellow legal pad already covered in her small, neat handwriting. "Coffee?" I asked. "Please." I made a pot. The machine gurgled and hissed. The smell filled the kitchen, bitter and strong. "Okay." Nessa opened her laptop. "Let's talk about what we have and what we need." I poured 2 cups, sat across from her. "We have the wire transfer showing she paid Dr. Shaw $15,000. We have the forged consent form from your surgery. We have Boyd's testimony about the bribe attempt." She ticked items off on her fingers. "We have the fraudulent grant applications. All of that is good, but it's not enough." "Not enough for what?" "Criminal charges, annulment, restraining order." She took a sip of coffee, grimaced. "God, Dad, when did you start making coffee this strong?" "When I stopped sleeping." Her expression softened. "We need proof the baby isn't yours, DNA evidence. Without that, everything else becomes circumstantial. She can claim the money was a loan, the signature was a misunderstanding, the grants were your idea. She won't agree to a paternity test. Then we need to find another way." Nessa pulled up a document. "Kansas law says a husband is presumed to be the father of any child born during the marriage. To overcome that presumption, you need clear and convincing evidence." I stared at my coffee. Steam rose in thin wisps, disappearing into the air above the table. "What kind of evidence?" "Medical records showing impossibility of conception, which we have, your sterility. But a good lawyer could argue you didn't know you were sterile, that you and Celeste were intimate, that the pregnancy could have happened before the surgery." She looked at me. "Did you and Celeste?" "Yes." The word came out harsh. "Until I found out. Then I moved to the guest room." Nessa nodded, made a note. "We need more. Phone records, emails, anything that shows she knew you were sterile, anything that connects her to another man." "I don't have access to her accounts anymore. She changed all the passwords." "I know." Nessa's smile was sharp. But she doesn't know I cloned her laptop last Christmas when I was visiting. She left it open while we were baking cookies. I told her I was just checking my email. I stared at my daughter. You cloned her laptop. I didn't trust her, Dad. Not from the start. Something about the way she looked at this place, like she was calculating square footage, not building a home. She opened a folder. I've been monitoring her cloud backup. Passive surveillance. Nothing illegal since I had physical access to the device with your permission as the homeowner. Nessa, do you want to know what I found or not? I took a long drink of coffee. It burned all the way down. Tell me. She turned the laptop around. On the screen was a text message thread. Celeste's number at the top. The other number listed only as donor coordinator. I read the messages, read them again. My hands started shaking. Dad? When? My voice didn't sound like mine. The dates match up. She contacted the sperm bank in September, 2 months before she told you she was pregnant. I stood, walked to the window. Outside, snow was falling now, fat flakes that caught the porch light and glowed before disappearing into darkness. She planned the baby the same way she planned the surgery. The words felt like stones. Before she ever told me she was pregnant, she'd already chosen the father. Behind me, Nessa's chair scraped. Her hand touched my shoulder. We've got her, Dad. This is the evidence we need. I watched the snow fall and thought about all the things I'd believed. About trust and love and second chances. About how loneliness could make you blind to the trap you were walking into. What do we do now? Nessa squeezed my shoulder. Now we set the trap. Our trap. The feed store felt different this time. Colder. Though the wood stove glowed red in the corner, men I'd known 40 years stood by the seed display, glanced away when I entered. I needed chicken wire. Simple enough. I walked to the back where the fencing supplies were stacked. Warren? Pete Halverson stepped into the aisle, blocking my path. His face was hard. Got a question for you. I stopped, waited. My wife saw Celeste at the clinic yesterday. Black eye, split lip. He crossed his arms. She asked how it happened. Celeste said she fell. But my wife's been a nurse 30 years. She knows the difference between falling and getting hit. The words hung there like smoke. I never touched her. That what you're going with? Pete's voice rose enough that heads turned. Because word around town is, you've been threatening her, harassing her while she's pregnant with your kid. It's not my kid. The store went quiet. Even the radio behind the counter seemed to stop mid-song. Pete laughed, sharp and mean. Right, keep telling yourself that, old man. He shouldered past me, hard enough that I stumbled. Other men watched. No one said a word. I put the chicken wire back, walked out empty-handed. My truck sat alone in the gravel lot. Someone had keyed the driver's side door, a long scratch that went through the paint down to bare metal. I stood there in the cold, hands in my pockets, and understood what Celeste was doing. She wasn't just stealing my land. She was stealing my name. Nessa was waiting at the kitchen table when I got home. Her face was pale, her laptop open. Tell me you didn't go into town alone. Needed supplies. Dad. I know. I hung up my coat. She's ahead of us. Not anymore. Nessa turned the laptop around. Look what I found on her cloud backup. The screen showed a photo. Celeste's face, makeup smeared, one eye swollen and purple. But something about it was wrong. The lighting was too even. The shadows didn't match. That's makeup, I said slowly. Stage makeup, professional grade. Nessa zoomed in. See the edges? She didn't blend it properly. And look at the metadata. She opened the file properties. Photo was taken 3 days ago, in your guest bedroom, right after you moved back in. My stomach went cold. She's documenting abuse that never happened. Building a case. Nessa clicked through more files. She's got 12 photos like this. Different injuries, different dates, all faked. All time-stamped for when you were either at Boyd's or in town with witnesses. I sat down, hard. The chair creaked under my weight. She's going to claim I'm violent, get a restraining order, use it to force me off my own land. Yes, Nessa's voice was tight. And it gets worse. She pulled up another document, a draft email, not sent yet, to Kansas Department of Children and Families. Subject urgent, domestic violence concern. I am a pregnant woman seeking help. My husband has become increasingly violent and unstable. The email went on, Detailed incidents that never happened. Times and dates, all false. A request for emergency intervention. When she sends this Nessa started. They'll take it seriously, I finished. Pregnant woman reporting abuse. They have to investigate. And once there's an official investigation, even if nothing's proven, the damage is done. Nessa closed the laptop. That's her endgame. Make you look dangerous, get you removed from the property, then file for the land transfer while you're fighting criminal charges. I thought about Pete Halverson's face, about the men in the feed store who'd looked away, about how quickly a reputation could turn to ash. How do we stop her? Nessa opened a different folder, pulled out a photo, Celeste's phone screen, showing a text conversation. This. She slid it across the table. I found her burner phone, the one she thought she'd hidden. She's been texting someone she calls D. I read the messages. C. Told everyone I'm leaving him, playing the victim perfectly. D. Good. Stay on script. No contact unless necessary. C. The old fool believed every word. This'll all be over by April. D. And the baby? C. Donor number 4782. Due date lines up with when I told him I got pregnant. He'll never know. My hands went numb. Who's D? Don't know yet. The number's registered to a prepaid account. And Nessa pulled up another screen. But look at this message from October. D. Confirmed payment received. $15K as discussed. Procedure scheduled for 8/14/19. He won't know what happened. The room tilted. The same amount, the same date. She didn't just pay Dr. Shaw. Nessa's voice was quiet. She paid someone to coordinate the whole thing, someone who's been helping her from the start. I stared at the messages, at the proof of conspiracy spelled out in blue text bubbles, at the casual cruelty of the old fool believed every word. This is it, I said. This is what we need. Yes. Nessa smiled, sharp as broken glass. And Dad? She has no idea we have it. Outside, the wind picked up. Branches scraped against the window like fingers trying to get in. For the first time since Dr. Cale's office, I felt something other than rage or grief. I felt ready. Pastor Eugene's car came up the lane just after noon. I watched from the barn, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold. He parked by the porch, sat in his car for a long moment before getting out. I met him halfway across the yard. The ground was soft now, March mud that sucked at our boots. The first real thaw of spring, and with it the smell of earth, waking up, minerals in decay, and something green underneath. Warren, he offered his hand. I shook it. His grip was firm but uncertain. Didn't expect to see you out here, Pastor. Can we talk? Just the two of us? I gestured toward the house. Coffee's on. Inside, Nessa had gone into town for groceries. The kitchen was clean, empty, quiet, except for the refrigerator's hum. I poured 2 cups, set them on the table. Pastor Eugene wrapped both hands around his mug like he was cold, though the room was warm. I've been praying about this situation, he started. About you and Celeste, about what's right. I waited. Oh, she came to see me yesterday, showed me the photos. His voice was careful. The bruises, the split lip, they're fake. That's what I needed to talk to you about. He looked up. I believe you. The words hit harder than I expected. Why? Because I know Celeste. He set down his mug. Not the woman she showed the congregation, the real one. She came to me 3 weeks ago, before any of this went public. Wanted to know about estate law, about how property transfers work when there's a death in the family. My chest went tight. She asked specifically about farms, about what happens to land when the owner dies without a will, about whether a pregnant widow would have stronger claims than adult children from a previous marriage. He met my eyes. Warren, she asked me this before she ever claimed you were abusive, before she filed for separation. The coffee in my stomach turned sour. She was planning for me to die. I don't know that for certain. But the questions... He shook his head. They weren't the questions of a woman trying to protect herself. They were the questions of someone calculating her position. Outside, a robin called from the cedar tree, the first one I'd heard this year. Helen used to say robins meant winter was over, that you could trust the ground to warm up now. I told the church board, Pastor Eugene continued, about the conversation, about my concerns. Half of them said I was overreacting, said I'd misunderstood. The other half... He paused. Mrs. Henderson called me a traitor to women in crisis, said I should be ashamed. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. His voice was firm now, the pastor voice he used for hard sermons. Because I stood in that pulpit and told you to forgive, told you to let God handle justice. But Warren, sometimes God handles justice through truth-tellers, through people willing to stand up and say what's happening is wrong. He pulled an envelope from his coat pocket, slid it across the table. This is a signed statement. Everything Celeste said to me, dated and witnessed. If you need it for legal proceedings, it's yours. I picked up the envelope. It was heavier than it should have been. This could cost you your job. Maybe. He stood, left his coffee untouched. But keeping silent would cost me something more important. At the door, he turned back. Warren, I'm sorry I told you to forgive before I told you I believed you. That was wrong. You deserve better. After he left, I sat alone in the kitchen with his testimony and my cold coffee and the sound of robins outside the window. I thought about Helen, about how she'd faced her death with grace I couldn't comprehend, how she'd forgiven the cancer that was killing her, forgiven God for allowing it, forgiven me for not being able to save her. I thought that was strength. Maybe it was. But this required a different kind of strength. The strength to stay angry, to not let go, to hold on to the truth even when everyone told you to release it. Helen had taught me how to forgive, but she'd also taught me when not to. I remembered her last coherent day, before the morphine took her words. She'd gripped my hand, her fingers thin as bird bones. Don't let anyone take advantage of your grief, she'd whispered. Don't let loneliness make you foolish. I'd promised, and then I'd broken that promise the moment Celeste smiled at me across a fundraiser dinner. But I wouldn't break it again. I opened Pastor Eugene's envelope, read his statement, every detail of Celeste's questions, dated and precise. The kind of testimony that would stand up in court, the kind that would expose her. My phone buzzed. Boyd, talk to the county sheriff. He wants to see you, says it's urgent. I texted back, when? Now. I'll drive. Boyd's truck rattled over the county roads, splashing through puddles that reflected gray sky. The radio played low, some country song about trucks and heartbreak and second chances. Sheriff Rawlings is a good man, Boyd said. Known him since high school. He won't take this lightly. What do you think he wants? To hear your side before Celeste files her complaint. Boyd turned onto Main Street. Smart move, getting ahead of it. The sheriff's office was in the old courthouse, brick and limestone that had stood since 1902. Inside it smelled like burnt coffee and old paperwork. A deputy I didn't recognize led us to a back office. Sheriff Rawlings stood when we entered. He was my age, maybe older, with a gray mustache and eyes that had seen too much and believed too little. Warren, Boyd, he gestured to chairs. Appreciate you coming in. We sat. He stayed standing, leaning against his desk. I'll get right to it. Celeste Gilchrist came in this morning, filed a formal complaint, domestic assault, harassment, stalking. He watched my face, said you've been terrorizing her for weeks, showed me photos, injuries, bruises. They're fake. I know. The room went still. You know? I've been a cop for 32 years, Warren. I know makeup when I see it, and I know you. He crossed his arms. But knowing and proving are two different things. She's building a case, got witnesses who'll say you've been acting unstable, got documentation, photos. The church is split down the middle on whether to believe her. We have evidence, Boyd said. Text messages, financial records, proof she paid a doctor to sterilize Warren without consent. That'll help in civil court. Maybe criminal, depending on how the DA sees it. Sheriff Rawlings sat down, looked tired. But here's the problem. She's pregnant. Public sympathy's going to be with her no matter what evidence you've got. And if she pushes for a restraining order, she can force me off my own land. Temporarily, until the investigation's complete. He tapped his desk, which could take months, long enough for her to do whatever she's planning. So what do we do? Sheriff Rawlings opened a drawer, pulled out a digital recorder. You get her confession. On tape. Clear and unambiguous. He slid the recorder across the desk. Then you bring it to me, and I'll make sure she never sets foot on your property again. I picked up the recorder, small, silver, the kind cops use for interviews. How do I get her to confess? Give her what she wants. He leaned back. Tell her you'll sign the land over. Meet her somewhere private, somewhere you can control the situation. Boyd and I exchanged glances. The grain silo, I said slowly. Sheriff Rawlings nodded. Make the call, Warren. Set the trap. And this time, you'll be the one waiting. I called her from the barn, where the signal was weak and the wind covered the shake in my voice. Celeste. Silence. Then, what do you want, Warren? To talk. Just you and me. No lawyers, no pastors, no drama. I don't think that's a good idea. I'll sign the papers. The words tasted like rust. The land transfer, whatever you need, but I want to do it face to face. You owe me that much. Another pause. I could hear her calculating, weighing risks against reward. Where? The farm. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. I'm not coming into the house. I know. Meet me at the grain silo, the tall one. There's a platform at the top where I do inspections. We can talk private up there, away from everything. Why the silo? Because it's mine. Was my great-granddad's, my father's. And before I sign it away, I want to stand in the one place that still remembers what the Gilchrist name used to mean. The line went quiet long enough I thought she'd hung up. Fine. 9 o'clock. Just you, no Boyd, no Nessa. Just me, I agreed. She ended the call without saying goodbye. Boyd stepped out from the equipment shed where he'd been listening on speaker. He held up the recorder Sheriff Rawlings had given us, checked the battery. It's ready. I'll be at the base of the silo with the backup recording equipment. The acoustics up there, anything she says will echo down clear as church bells. What if she doesn't confess? She will. Boyd's voice was certain. People like her, they can't help themselves. Once they think they've won, they gotta tell you how they did it. Need you to know how smart they are. That night, I didn't sleep, just stood at the bedroom window watching the silos catch moonlight, thinking about what was coming. Morning arrived cold and clear. The sun was just breaking over the tree line when Celeste's car came up the lane, a new sedan, leased with money she'd pulled from our joint account before I could freeze it. She got out wearing designer jeans and a coat that cost more than a month's grain check. Her stomach showed now, undeniable. 4 months along, maybe 5, I met her by the silo. The ladder ran up the outside, 40 feet of steel rungs bolted to curved metal. At the top was a narrow platform where I'd stand during harvest to check grain levels. You first, she said. Afraid I'll push you? I'm not stupid, Warren. I climbed. Each rung was cold through my gloves, the metal singing slightly in the wind. At the top, I stepped onto the platform. It was maybe 4 feet across, surrounded by a waist-high railing. The silo's roof curved up behind us like a dome. Below, the farm spread out in shades of brown and gray, fields waiting for spring planting. The house where 4 generations had lived and died, the barn where my father taught me to fix things that broke. Celeste climbed slower, careful of her stomach. When she reached the platform, she stayed near the ladder, one hand on the rail. You got the papers? I pulled an envelope from my coat. Inside were the land transfer documents Nessa had drawn up, legal-looking enough to pass, useless in court because they lacked proper notarization. Right here. She reached for them. I pulled back. First, I want to know why. My voice echoed slightly off the silo's curve. Why me? Why go to all this trouble? Warren, you owed me that much, the truth, just once. She studied me, weighing something. Then she smiled. Not the soft smile she'd used when we were dating, the real one, sharp and cold. You really want to know? Yes. Because you were easy. The words rang clear in the morning air. Lonely widower with 600 acres and no sense. Perfect mark. I saw you at that fundraiser and I knew. Here's a man so desperate for company he'll believe anything. The wind caught her hair. She didn't bother brushing it back. The sterilization was insurance. Couldn't risk you getting me actually pregnant. Not when I had better genetic options lined up. Paid Dr. Shaw $15,000 to handle it during your hernia surgery. You signed the consent form, or at least, my version of your signature did. By the time you figured it out, statute of limitations would be expired. And the baby? Donor 4782, Stanford grad, 6'2", IQ over 140, better genes than you could ever provide. She laughed, the sound bouncing off metal. You should see your face. Did you really think I wanted your child? You're almost 70, Warren. I wanted your land, not your DNA. My hands were steady on the railing. Below, I could see Boyd's truck parked by the barn, could imagine him with the recording equipment catching every word. What about the bruises? The abuse claims? Stage makeup? Learned it in college when I did theater. She was proud now, couldn't help herself. Documented everything, built a perfect case. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky if you're not in jail. And if I sign the papers now, then maybe I'll drop the charges. Let you live in the farmhouse until you die, which won't be long, the way you look. She held out her hand. Papers, Warren. I pulled out the consent form instead. The one for my surgery, the one with her forged signature. You mean this paper? Her face went white. Where did you get that? Dr. Kale. She kept copies. Knew something was wrong. I held it up. Your handwriting, Celeste. Not mine. A forensic expert confirmed it. That doesn't prove... The wire transfer does. $15,000. Your account to MedConsult LLC, 2 weeks before my surgery. I pulled out my phone, showed her the screenshot. And then there's the burner phone. The one you thought you'd hidden. The text to your donor coordinator. The photos. The whole plan, spelled out in your own words. She grabbed for the phone. I stepped back. You can't use that. It's illegal. Nessa had physical access to your laptop with my permission as the homeowner. Cloud backup did the rest. Completely legal. I put the phone away. Sheriff Rawlings has copies. So does the state medical board and the district attorney. Her hand went to her stomach. Protective. For a moment she looked small, afraid. Then the fear turned to rage. You think you're so smart? You can't prove anything. It's your word against mine, and I'm a pregnant woman. They'll believe me. They always believe me. Not when they hear this. I tapped my coat pocket, where the recorder sat running. Every word, Celeste, every confession, clear as a bell. She lunged for me. I sidestepped. She caught herself on the railing, breathing hard. You bastard. No. My voice was quiet. Just a man who trusted the wrong person, but I'm done trusting you. Below, a car door slammed. Sheriff Rawlings had arrived, right on schedule. He looked up, raised a hand. Mrs. Gilchrist, his voice carried clear in the morning air, amplified by the silo's curve. Need you to come down here, please. Celeste stared at me. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. You set me up. I gave you what you wanted, a chance to tell me how smart you are, how you played the lonely old fool. I gestured to the ladder. Now you get to explain it to the sheriff. She climbed down slowly. When she reached the ground, Sheriff Rawlings was waiting with a deputy and Nessa, who held a folder thick with evidence. I stayed on the platform watching it unfold, watching Celeste's hands go behind her back, watching the deputy read her rights, watching justice happen in my own barnyard, under a sky that was finally starting to look like spring. Boyd climbed up, handed me a thermos of coffee. Got every word, he said, clear as I've ever heard. We stood together, two old men on a grain silo, and watched the sheriff's car drive away with Celeste in the back seat. The wind was warm now, carrying the smell of thawed earth and possibility. You ready to plant? Boyd asked. I took a long drink of coffee. It was hot and bitter and exactly right. Yeah, I said. I'm ready. The charges came fast once the evidence was filed. Conspiracy to commit assault, fraud, forgery, insurance fraud for the false abuse claims. The district attorney called it one of the most calculated schemes he'd seen in 20 years. Celeste's attorney tried to negotiate, offered to drop all claims to the farm in exchange for reduced charges. The DA said no, so did I. The annulment was granted in 3 weeks. Kansas law was clear. Fraud invalidated a marriage contract. Celeste had married me under false pretenses for financial gain. The judge's signature made it like the marriage never existed. The church split permanently. Half the congregation left with Pastor Eugene to start a new fellowship in the old Grange Hall. The rest stayed at First Lutheran, convinced I'd somehow orchestrated everything to hurt an innocent woman. I stopped caring which side people chose. Dr. Shaw was arrested in Nevada 2 months later, turned state's evidence against Celeste for a reduced sentence, admitted she'd paid him to sterilize me, provided the forged consent forms, helped coordinate the whole scheme. The medical board revoked his license permanently. The hospital settled with me quietly, enough to cover legal fees and then some. I didn't want their money, but Nessa said take it. Said it was acknowledgement of harm done. So I took it, used it to build Nessa a new equipment shed on the property line where she'd build her house someday, where her kids would grow up knowing the land the way I had. Boyd stopped by one morning with coffee and the local paper. Celeste's sentencing was front page, 3 years minimum, eligible for parole after 18 months. Says here the baby went to foster care, Boyd read. They're looking for the biological father through the donor bank. I set down my coffee. That child didn't ask for any of this. No, Boyd folded the paper. But neither did you. We sat in silence, two old men who'd seen too much and survived it anyway. April came warm and early. The fields had dried enough to work, the soil dark and ready. Nessa arrived the night before, planning with groceries in her old farm boots, the ones she'd worn as a teenager. We started at dawn. The John Deere ran smooth, all those hours in the barn paying off. I drove while Nessa rode beside me, checking seed flow, adjusting depth. The smell of diesel mixed with turned earth, that ancient combination that meant spring and work and things beginning. Meadowlarks sang from fence posts, the sky stretched blue and endless. At the end of the first pass, I stopped the tractor, shut it down. The silence was immediate, just wind and birds and the creak of warming metal. Nessa climbed down, walked to the edge of the field, scooped up a handful of soil, let it run through her fingers. Good dirt, she said, best in the county. I joined her. Your great-great-granddad knew what he was doing when he homesteaded here. She looked at me, Helen's eyes in a younger face. This land's mine now? Soon as the paper's clear, you and whatever family you make. What if I don't make one? What if it's just me? Then it's just you. I put my hand on her shoulder. Land doesn't care about bloodlines, just cares who tends it honest. She smiled, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Come on, old man. We've got 300 acres to plant. We worked until the sun was high, and my back was screaming. Stopped for lunch, sandwiches Nessa made, thermoses of cold water, chocolate chip cookies that tasted like Helen's recipe. I sat on the tractor wheel and looked at what we'd done. Straight rows of disturbed earth, seeds beneath waiting for rain and sun to do their work. In a few weeks there'd be green shoots. By summer, wheat as high as your knee. The farmhouse stood in the distance, white and weathered. The silos caught afternoon light, glowing like monuments. Boyd's truck came up the lane, dust trailing behind. Right on time, Nessa said. I told him we'd need a third hand this afternoon. Boyd got out with his work gloves already on. Where you want me? Seed bag rotation, I said. These old bones can't lift like they used to. These old bones never could, Boyd shot back. We worked until sunset painted everything gold and red. When the light was too low to see rows clearly, we called it done for the day. Stood together at field's edge, 3 generations of farming and survival and stubborn refusal to let the land go. She'll grow good, Boyd said, looking at the planted field. She will, I agreed. Behind us the house was dark, but not empty. Not anymore. We'd survived the winter, spring had come, and we were still here. Some nights I still think about that consultation room, the fluorescent buzz, Dr. Kale's careful voice. The moment the floor dropped out from under everything I thought I knew. I think about Celeste's laugh at that fundraiser, how it sounded like hope after 2 years of grief, how loneliness can make you see light where there's only a lure, make you trust a smile that's really just bait. I don't hate her, that's the strange part. I pity her, which maybe is worse. She saw a man's empty house and thought opportunity instead of home. Saw acres of legacy and calculated square footage. In the end, she'll serve her time and walk away with nothing but the knowledge that she got caught. The land, though, the land remembers. It remembers my great-granddad breaking sod with a hand plow, my father checking irrigation lines in the dark before dawn, Helen planting tomatoes by the kitchen window, humming gospel hymns while she worked. Me teaching Nessa to drive the tractor, her small hands on the wheel, her laughter bright as summer wheat. The land doesn't lie. Seeds planted in greed never grow straight. But seeds planted in honest work, those put down roots that last generations. I stand at my bedroom window most mornings now, watching the sun come up over fields gone green with spring wheat. Barn swallows nest in the silos again. The robins are back, pulling worms from soil that's alive and warm. Nessa's moved into the old hired hand's cottage. Says she'll renovate it slow. Build it right. Maybe find someone worth sharing it with someday. Maybe not. Either way, the land is hers. The choice is hers. Boyd still brings coffee every morning. We don't talk about what happened much. Don't need to. We just sit on the porch and watch the day begin. 2 old men who've seen darkness and decided it doesn't get the last word. Pastor Eugene's new church is small, but growing. He preached last Sunday about the difference between forgiveness and accountability, about how Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is tell the truth, even when it costs you. I thought about that. About Helen's grace. About whether I'd failed some test by not letting go, by holding on to evidence and anger and the need for justice. Then I thought about Nessa laughing on the tractor. About spring wheat breaking through soil. About how the land will be here long after I'm gone, and it'll remember who protected it. Some things deserve forgiveness. Some things deserve exposure. Knowing the difference, that's not weakness, that's wisdom. The silence that came after the storm isn't empty anymore. It's full of birdsong and tractor engines and the sound of things growing. It's the silence of a man who knows what he's worth and doesn't need to shout it. It's the silence of home. Spring came, and I was still here.